All right. Everything is set, so we can begin. So today we are going to take a look at a few things. Firstly, we will be adding user roles to the phone book application that was made yesterday. Essentially, the idea is to have an admin and a user. So the admin will have some additional features, which the user will not. This is something very common in a lot of applications. Actually, for most businesses, they will require an admin panel and a user panel. So this will be something important. Also, we will be taking a look at Google Authentication, also known as Google OAuth. This is also important because these days third-party logins are very common in most of the websites. Say it's Google, it's Facebook, even GitHub these days. So that's also something important. We'll take a look at it, but to start with, let's begin with adding user roles to the phone book application that was made yesterday. Now, the first thing I would do, since I am working on previous code, I will check out the package.json for both of the files, or both of the folders actually. So for scripts, we have two. One just sets up the server with, I assume, initial data, and one will keep the server running. Okay. And for our client, we have Vite, pretty simple. The reason behind checking the package.jsons is so that I know what dependencies are already installed or what I will need to install. Okay, now for this application, I believe a different database URL was saved. So what I'll do, I'll just create a new project for myself and we can go on from there. Okay. So let's create a new project. Let me call this user roles and OAuth. Okay, so that's all good. Let's go to next. Okay, create project. Okay, that's all set. All right. So let's go to databases and let's build a database. I'm gonna go for the free version. Everything else seems fine. So the password is something that I would copy and paste somewhere because I would need to use it later on. Create user. IP address this, or I could just put a basic one, 0.0.0.0. This should make it accessible from any IP address. All right, our database is set on our dashboard. Now what we have to do is find a way to connect it to our application. Now in order to connect it to my application, this is the code I will need. This is the link for the URL, which I will be changing over here. Okay, and so the link doesn't come with the password. The password I have to put in separate. Again, this is something that you're supposed to keep hidden in your code. I am showing it on my screen because I guess it will be easier for you guys to understand how to make these small changes. Anyways, because I will probably delete this project later anyway, so it won't matter, but the password, you need to keep it secret. Okay, so we have the link all set up. That's good. Now what we can do is we can actually make sure the connections work. Let me see. Is everything good? Okay. So I will go into my server folder and see if my MongoDB connection is working properly. I think yes, this was the script, user setup. So let's do that. First, I need to do a npm install to make sure everything's installed properly, and then I'm just gonna do npm run user setup. Okay, let's see. Okay, everything's done correctly. Let's check out my dashboard or the database itself. Browse collections. Okay, so everything's uploaded properly. Perfect. All right, so now we know that the connection between MongoDB and our application itself is established. So our backend server is good. So let's keep it running. This was just the setup command or the setup script for the backend, but we also need to keep the server running with nodemon. So let's just use the script that's already been created over here. npm run user server. Okay. All right, so now our database is up and running. The next thing I would probably want to do is run my front end. So I will go into my client folder and do a npm install. Notice I am doing an npm install separately because there are two separate package.jsons over here. So they require separate npm installs. Anyway, moving forward. So now I will just do npm and let me see the scripts here. Run dev. So dev is what will be running Vite over here. So I'll just write npm run dev. And let's check out this site over here. Okay. All right. So this works fine. Everything is there. So now let's actually start making changes. So ideally, when I am creating an account, I want to add a user role, right? So what I will do is I will add a drop down that will show me what user roles are available. Now, in an ideal case, the admin accounts will be created separately. You won't be getting the option for having admin accounts being created like this, or maybe you would, depending on the type of project. But for the simplicity, let's just have a drop down. All right. Okay. So before we go ahead with that, okay, I think we're all set. All right, so let's take a look at the components first and try to understand which component I need to make changes to. Now, if I go into app.jsx, let's take a look at it. Component, inside the component, if we take a look at the HTML part, sorry about that. Okay, so if we have to take a look at the HTML or JSX part, you see the first thing that we are doing is going into a component, which is login form, which I assume will be this login.jsx, right? Okay, so once I go into login.jsx, let's try to see where we need to make necessary changes. So inside login.jsx, we have a conditional rendering going on based on the state of the user. We will either show this, who's logged in, or we will be showing the form. Now, the thing about the form is, if we want to add the admin or user role, this is where we will have to make changes. So right after my input fields, let's just create a select tag and enter. Let me put in some IDs. So let me put a placeholder saying this should be role, and also a name saying this should be role. Okay. So next line, our select options created. Now we have to create the options themselves. Option, going into this, we can name the first one admin and the second one user. Really doesn't matter based on just how you want to display your information, but I'm just showing admin first. Okay, so this is all set. We have our drop down ready. Okay, so now we have to make it functional. And in order to do that, we have to get the values for these somewhere. Now, notice over here, let's try to understand the flow of how the code's working. So handle submit. This is essentially taking care of all the submit functions. So let's take a look into what's happening inside. So inside handle submit, we are creating a new user based on what's getting entered over here. And okay, I have a question in the chat. For line 29, are the quotation marks correct? All right. There seems to be something missing. Okay, thanks for catching on that. This would probably give me an error later on. Okay. But that's odd. Should have probably given me an error. Oh no. So this, what would happen is this whole thing would be considered as the placeholder. Yeah, that's probably what would have happened. Anyways, let me just fix this. All right. Moving forward, over here, we're just getting the target values and creating the user, the object over here. And we are passing it on to these functions based on which button is getting clicked. So on login is on login and on create, actually both these functions are inside JSX actually. So let's take a look at this. On login, on create. So these are the props that are getting passed on. So based on that, on login will be referring to handle login function over here, which will take the user that we are sending, and will essentially run these functions. It will go to login user, which we should have the file right over here. Let's create, this is login. So when we go for a login user from here, it will go into this file, sending in the user object, which will be posted into our database. Similarly, for onCreate, there should be a function called handle create. There you go. There you have create user. So this will be passing on the user object to this file, where the new user will be posted into the database. So now let's come to what changes we have to make. It's pretty simple. I think this is where the values are being set. So what we can do, we can just add a role over here, saying key name would be role, and the value would be, I believe, e.target dot role dot value. Okay, so this should be working just fine. e.target dot role dot value. Okay, so we are getting the value. Everything's fine. Do we have to make any changes over here? Okay, no. We're just passing down the user object. So where else do we need to make changes? Like just making changes here won't work, right? There's more to it. So I think we're pretty much done with the front end changes. Yeah, we're just getting the value and passing it in. It should be ready to get pushed into the database. So, okay, let's take a break from the front end and go into the back end part. So we already know that username and password were two values being sent to our database under this collection, I think. Yeah. So under users, we were getting the username and password, which is already getting hashed out through the bcrypt function. So now what we have to do is we have to make some changes. We have to add this role to our objects. So how do we do that? We go into models first. Let's check out what the models look like. We have username, password hash. Let's add another item over here, role, and I will say this will be string. Okay, that's set. Nothing else to change over here. We're just deleting the ID, the version, and the password hash is also being deleted. So nothing we have to change here. But there's something else that we have to take a look at as well, the routers. Now, the routers are the ones that are essentially making the requests work, right? So this is probably one place that we would ideally need to make a change, but let's take a look from the top. So we are getting the users. Okay, everything's fine. Nothing to get changed here. Okay, so I guess this is the first place that we would ideally need to add our role. So let's do that. Let's also make sure something is selected. And okay. Here we're creating a new user. This would also require, this would also require a role being sent. And okay, new user being created, new user being saved, and the user is being sent. Okay, I think we're all set over here. Let's actually try it out. I think everything is running. Let's go to phone book and let's just write down just, let me just put in a password. Guess admin is good. Let's just do a create. Okay, something's wrong. Let's try to see what. Okay. Let's first fix the backend then. Let's go to server. That is interesting because the server doesn't get any error over here. It's the front end that's causing issues. Failed to reload. So Samani says you wrote role, not role inside if condition. Could you be a little more specific? Which if condition are we talking about? Okay, let's track it one by one. All right. I don't think this would, all right, this could actually be it. Okay, let's try it again. Oh, there you go. All right. Smallest of the errors causing the biggest of the problems. Okay. So, okay, it works now. We should be getting admin over here. Let me refresh this. Okay, we are getting the role. Now, in order to make sure that we are having that kind of conditional rendering, what we need to do is we need to check for the role itself. And where do we make that kind of check? It should be in the front end. Okay, so roles getting uploaded or sent into our database, so nothing more to do in the back end right now. Whatever's left is to be done in the front end. If we go into our components now, we'll see that in app.jsx, first of all, we are sending in login, so nothing more to do over there. But next, what we have to take a look at is the contact lists, because if we want to get rid of something from here, for example, what I'm thinking is only the admins can delete numbers and the users can only favorite or unfavorite. So the delete option won't be there for the users. So in order to do that, I will need to check how these components work. So let's go into contact list. So yeah, going into contact list, we can see that it's getting all these from the previous component, and then it's passing all those on to contact. All right. Okay, so what we can do is we can send the admin role to contact list and then send it back to contact and then do a conditional rendering over here. All right, so moving on. I think I have to make changes over here. Is it? No, in app.jsx, my bad. So let's actually send another prop over here. Let's do role, and I will be passing on user.role. The reason behind me sending in user.role directly is because we are already getting the entire user object in this file as a state. So I only need the user role. I don't need the rest. Let me also pass it down to this one as well. Okay, so that's done. Let's go into contact list and add role to this. Nothing else needs changing. I'll add another prop here. Role over here again. And I'll add role here as well. Okay. So now we should be getting the role from our app.jsx. That being done, we can now create a conditional rendering over here. All right. So the conditional rendering should look something like this. Role is equal to two equals to admin. Okay. And over here, I can just add a question mark. Next line, I can add a colon. So after the question mark, let's take this button over here and paste it there. Let's make sure it's aligned. And over here, I could just write down null. So if the role is admin, then we will be taking a look at the delete button. But if the role is not admin, then it will just return null. So there will be no delete button. Ideally, this should work now. So let's try it again. Let me log out. Okay, so I think I can write down John 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, it's random password. Let me set this to user now and do a create. Okay, so it works. No delete button for the user John. Let's check if everything is okay over here. Refresh. Okay, so user is not getting any delete button over here. Let's log out and let's try logging in with this and see if we get the delete button. Okay, so our user role functionality is working. The admin, as you can see over here, I set myself as an admin. So I am getting the delete buttons, but the other user, which is John in this case, is not getting any delete buttons. Any questions so far? Anyone with any questions? Let me know if there's any part you're not entirely sure about. I can explain it again. And let me know in the chat if you don't have any problems either, then we can move to the next part, which will be Google OAuth. Okay, so I assume this makes sense for everyone. Let's log out of this and go back to our code. All right. So Google OAuth. Has anyone worked with Google Authentication over here before? Um, Not exactly, but yeah. So code-wise is what today what we're gonna learn is when you go into any website, you know how they give you the option for login with Google or login with Facebook or things like that. So we are gonna learn to set that up. The thing is, we will be learning about Google only. So I want to go through the documentation with you guys so that if you are trying to implement any other platform's authentication, you can go through the documentation and figure it out on your own as well. So let's take a look at it. It's always very simple. It tells you what you have to do at the very beginning, and based on that, you kind of just move forward. So the first thing that you would need over here is you have to install this library, Google OAuth or React OAuth slash Google. That's the exact name, to be honest. Let's go to client. Okay. Okay, let's not mess with that. Let me go into client now. All right. So now that I'm inside client, I will just paste this. And this should be good enough for installing our library. Okay, so let's go back to the documentation. You can see the documentation and VS Code both, right? Just trying to understand if I'm sharing the right screen. Can you guys see the documentation as well? Okay, okay, very good. All right, so, okay, we have installed it in our code. Now, before we move on with any other code related stuff, we have to actually create the project on our cloud. So the link would be console.cloud.google.com. I'll write it in the chat. .google.com. So yeah, this is the link that you need to go into your dashboard. All right, so once we're there, let's create a new project. Let's call this phone book create. Right, so that's selected. Now, the next thing that we would probably have to do is look for the OAuth consent screen. Okay, so we could also go through this, I think. Go into API and services, and then you will have these over here. So OAuth consent screen, what does this say? Okay, so this should be able to test any user. So do external. Now I have to create a name for my app. We'll call this phone book as well. Just use mine. No more logos. I don't have a domain either. This is gonna be, okay, save and continue. All right, so now that we are here, we can add different scopes, but for now, this isn't very important. We can just move forward. We can add users. So for test users, I will just add myself again. Add, save and continue. Okay, everything seems fine. Back to dashboard. Okay, so the consent screen is set. Now let's take a look at the credentials. We over here don't have a credential set already, so let's create one. Now we could create an API key, or we could also create our OAuth client ID. So right now we would be looking at the OAuth client ID. That's what we need for our application. So this will be a web application, and I have to add the links as well. So the link that you will provide for now is the local host one. If you use your own hosting or something else, you would have to provide that link. Now for local host, they do something weird over here. You have to just do it separately like this. So you have to add just localhost first, and then you have to add the actual link again. This is a very odd thing. I don't know why this happens. Like if you don't add just localhost, for some reason, when you click on the login with Google button, it won't show you your accounts. So you kind of have to do this. We'll do the same thing over here as well. And this right here. Okay. So we are done with creating. Okay, our API client or OAuth client is ready. We can just copy this code and move on to what we're going to do in VS Code right now. So let's take a look at this again, the documentation. So our client is set up, our client ID is set up. Right, as you can see over here in the doc over here, they are also mentioning the same thing. You have to add both localhost and localhost port number. Okay, moving forward, we have to import Google Auth provider. Okay, so this part, this is something you need to do for the whole app. So Google needs to be able to launch the entire application. So what we are going to do, well, not necessarily launch, it's more like access the whole application. So the changes for this part are going to be made in our main.jsx. So the idea is we are essentially going to wrap this whole thing with Google Auth provider. Let's take this, copy. Let's go to the next line. Okay. And let's get rid of this. Now it's set. So instead of this, we will just paste our client ID, which I realized got removed from my clipboard. Just paste this. Okay, this should be good enough. All right, so that's my client ID. Everything seems fine. So Google Auth can now access my application. Let's go back to the documentation again. So first we have to set up a login. Now, the thing is, if we use this tag over here, Google Login, Google will provide its own pre-built button. But if we want to use a button of our own, in this case, that's what we're going to do. We will have to do something a little different, which will be this. So we have to create a variable holding the response from this function, use Google Login. All right, so let's do that. Well, but first, let's take care of the designing aspect. Let's create a button over here. Copy. Actually, no, I can just don't have to copy the whole thing. Okay. And for this button, we can just call this Google Login. All right, so Google Login button is created. Let's see our website. Okay, everything is fine. Now let's go back to the documentation. So let's try to understand this. So what this function will be doing, it's just going to call the login instance from Google. And on success, it's going to give us a token response. And we can use that to later call whatever information Google provides us about the user. So this will only generate a token. Let's actually try it and see if it works. All right, so over here, let's create const login is equal to, oh, but I will need to import it first. Okay, so let me import use Google login, capital Google login. Okay, so this works from, let's see, was at, where is the documentation? I think it was this, right? So we can just paste this over here. So it'll be getting the function use Google login from React Auth, OAuth Google library. And once we have the function over here, we can just take it and use it over here, which will be use login. And then we have a first bracket and that. So our function is set. Now we have to just write a on success. So on success, we are gonna get, say, code response. Okay, and that we will, let's first console.log this response and see what it looks like. Console.log. And let's call this code response. Okay. On error, let's set this to just whatever error gets sent back, and console.log login failed. Oh, all of it is in capital? No. Okay. Login failed and comma error. Okay, this should be good. Let's test it. See if it works. Inspect console. Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh, okay. Now it makes sense why this button doesn't work. It's because I did not set a on click for this. Login. Okay. Let's refresh. All right, we get this. Click on that. Continue. Okay. Cross origin opener policy. Okay, we'll take a look at that later. It works, so let's just go ahead with the lecture. So this is what the response looks like. This token right here is what we will need to get the information provided by Google about the user, which I believe is very basically just the name, email ID, and the picture. I think that's about it. They don't give you a lot. So, okay, we have the access token, and the token type is bearer. This is something important because when we are sending in the request in our header, we will have to mention this as well. Okay, so this is fine. Well, we could ideally use this link to access the profiles, but there's a more recent link, I believe. We can use that. I think I wrote it down somewhere. All right, before we go forward, we would probably need to think about how we want to go forward from here. So we got our response, we got our token, but now we have to make sure we get all the information from Google. So we need a function that will run our Axios. So let's just create a basic function that doesn't really return anything. Function. Let's call this get data. And let's call this token. And we are all set. I think I need to install Axios as well, actually. Oh no, we actually have Axios installed, I believe. Do we? Yeah, Axios installed, so I don't have to install it again. All right, so where was I? Here, getting the token. So let's just call in Axios. Let's do a .get, and as for the link, I think this should suffice. I have it written down over here. Command C. Okay, so this will be the link for the Google APIs. And yeah, that's about it, not much. Access underscore token. And our token in this case would be $token dot access token. Okay. Token dot access token. Now there should be a underscore in between that. Okay, I think the link is good. We have access token. All right, it seems fine. Let's go to the next line. And we can actually open up another curly brace. And inside this, we will be writing our headers. For our headers, we have authorization to begin with. Authorization. And again. Okay, so for this part, we will need to send in two things. Oh, we lost that. Okay, so for this, we will need to send the token type and the access token both at the same time. So for this, inside the quotations, what we can do, we can write down bearer, which is the token type, and the token itself, in this case, token dot access token. Okay, this seems doable. Notice it has to be the exact same as this, or else it won't work, because the response only stores it in under this name. All right, so okay, our authorization part is done. We have to tell them what kind of file we are expecting. Accept application / JSON. Okay, think it's all set. Good. Okay, think I made a mistake here. It should be over here. Okay. Looks fine. The link is good. We have our header. We have the brackets closed. So now let's just write down what's gonna happen next. So .then, we are getting the resource or the response, and let's make a arrow function over here. Now inside this, what I will do is basically just, well, do I have a state created? I don't. Okay, let's just store it in a variable for now, because I don't think I need an extra state here. Extra states create problems. So I can just save rest.data in this. Let's call this something else maybe. Let's call this response data. Response data. Okay, so the response data is being stored here. That's good. Let's see if I can console.log this. Console.log and actually I can just do this. Response data. All right, let's try it out again. Log in. Interesting. So does that mean, oh, I'm not actually calling this anywhere, right? So instead of console.log, let me change this to get data. And let's see if it works now. Okay, so it works. I get my response, my data. So I have my name, my email ID, my ID, and whatever the pictures. So we are getting the response properly. That means everything is working as intended. But now the challenge is we have to somehow make sure once we get this, we are actually logging into our application. So let's make that functionality work. Now, in order to do that, we have to change this state over here, user. So user only shows this part when this is true or this holds some kind of value in it. Now, in order to change this, I won't be able to change this directly from here because the user state is actually being passed on from this file over here, if you can see. And I also need the login information over here because all these other components require those login informations too. So for that, let's do something. Let's create a function that will essentially just get the user state or the user object from our login.jsx. So let's do it right after this. Let me do a const and let's call this g login user is equal to, let me call this data, and an arrow function is needed over here. Let's set user to data. Okay, so what this will do, this will essentially just get the response from login.jsx and set our user state to that. In order for that to happen, we will need to send it from here. So let's call this, let's call this, no, I think get user is already taken. So just call this glogin is equal to, okay. So right now I am essentially just setting whatever prop has to be sent. But then again, there has to be a function Do I need another function? I don't think so. Huh. Okay. So, right. glogin will essentially get this function over here. glogin user. Right. Okay. Seems all right. Everything's set. Login form. I should be able to access that function from here. And what I am gonna do is I am gonna set our glogin function. Wait, I have to get it from here as well. glogin. No, it's just glogin. So I have to get this function and send in the res.data or just response data in this case. I think the L was small. Okay, makes sense now. But one thing, just sending this won't be as useful because if you take a look at our code or the console actually, sorry, over here, this response of the data does not actually have a user row. So that's something that we will have to add. Also, if you see, there's a difference in our key naming as well. So over here, this key, the name, it's called name. But in our code, if we see the models, it's called username. So if I'm trying to incorporate both, I will somehow have to change one or the other. Now, if I have to change username to name over here, I will have to make changes in multiple places, which I don't want to do. Making changes in the front end is easier than making changes in the back end. So what I will do actually is inside this function, I will make some additions and deductions. So the first thing that I would need to do is probably change the username. Let me do that like this. So response data dot username is equal to response data dot name. Can anyone tell me what I'm doing over here in this line, line 39? So this glogin function is what I'm getting from our app.jsx. I'm just sending it from here as a prop. So glogin essentially refers to this function, which essentially just gets the data from our login.jsx. Because for Google, all the data is getting extracted into the login.jsx file. So I somehow need to send it from here to app.jsx. In general, what I'm doing is making sure that the user state is being updated properly because if you see, we only have one user state for the whole code. So if anything changes for this, the whole code will reflect the changes, whether it's good or bad. Right, so back to the question. Anyone knows what or can anyone tell me what I'm doing in line 39 over here?
Are you making another, so the username we already have, and you are assigning it response data.name. So I think it was different, right? The way we had done it in our code was different than the way it was showing. So I think you're kind of copying it over.
Exactly. So if you see over at on our console, the name is just name. The field value of name, the key value of name is just name. But in our code, in our models, we have it down as username. The reason behind me doing that is to make sure that this right here, the name that I'm showing, I can just do it with one variable.
So
So
can't we had we initially written like assigned a name, if you would have done it as just name instead of username, then that would have been better.
yes, but but it's like, since we're working on the same project, Alim didn't know that this would probably be the outcome of the Google response. So he named it username in the conventional way, but Google kind of just takes it as name. So we're changing that because our model doesn't reflect it. But if our model had reflected the same key value, in other words, the key name over here would be username, then we wouldn't have to change anything. But since it doesn't reflect, we will have to make those changes. In the chat, I have a question, I think. The name you got from Google account sets with username. Yes, so what I'm doing essentially is I'm creating a new field over here called username, and I'm setting the response data dot name as its value. So username and name will essentially have the same value. It would look something like this ideally. Where is annotation? So it would look something like this. So name, say, I'm just gonna write down initial and username. So I'm just creating another field with the same value. But the thing is, if I have two of them with the same values, doesn't it make it redundant, like one of them? So in this case, response data.name has absolutely no use anymore if I'm already creating a new field with the name username. So let's just change this and create response data. Yeah, for the naming issues, this happens sometimes because when we are using third-party APIs, we don't really know exactly what the response is gonna look like. I mean, if we know what the response will look like, it's obviously better to design your backend or database similar to that. But if not, it doesn't really matter. It's just a couple of lines. We can make some changes here. So what we are gonna do is we are gonna delete response.name. So this will get rid of the redundancy, which in this case is the key value name, right? All right, so username is done, but another thing's missing. It's the user role. So that's also something we need to add. In order to add an extra field to your object, we can do it like this as well. I will call this role and it will be equal to user. So how I'm designing this is I want the Facebook or Google logins to always be users. So if you're logging in with user, you can't logging in with Google, you can't be an admin. An admin has to be manually logged in. So we are setting the Google logins permanently to user. So any Google login will be a user for our application. Okay, so that's good. We are getting user over here. Sounds right. Okay. Am I missing anything? I think everything is set. We are sending the value to glogin as well. Okay, let's try it out. So let's do it like this. Okay, there you go. It works. So if I log in with no, so the thing is, Google logins, anyone can log in with Google. An admin account would ideally be, at least like for simplicity of this project, we want admin role to be manually entered. Actually, in a lot of systems, admins are actually manually entered because they require a specific password or key to be created. Admin accounts, because it's not open for anyone. But for simplicity, we added this drop down, which wouldn't ideally be there in a normal system for any business. Okay, so this works. I can just log in. Let me use this account. Continue. Okay, so this stays as a user. If I log out works. Let me, I think John was, no, Tasneem was the admin over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'll just log in. Okay, so now this account gets the delete buttons. So we are all set. Now this is something I need to look into later on, but this is probably something pretty complex because I looked at it earlier. It has very few solutions online. But yeah, other than that, everything works fine. Any questions? Anyone? So I think Samani has a questions. Do you do these for Google authentication or for security issues? I mean, all of the work that you're doing with Google Cloud. So we just want to add Google login because platforms like Google or Facebook or even Twitter, I don't think Twitter has a login, does it? Not sure. I haven't seen it anywhere, but Facebook definitely, Google definitely. So what they do, they take care of a lot of stuff for you. For example, the password hashing and everything, you don't have to worry about all that. I think they also have a timeout or something. Let me check the console. I think there should be something like how long this will run. Let me try to console.log this, see if this works now. Console.log. Okay, so it also actually gives you a time for expiration, with your response when you're getting the token. So it kind of handles those as well for you. One thing you should know is, say you've logged in with Google, but the account you're logged in or the account you're using for this phone book application, you're logging out from that account from Google itself, that would cause your login from here to get expired as well. So in order for you to be logged into this phone book application, I believe you would have to keep that account logged in here as well. I know Facebook definitely does that. Google, I think also, yeah. So that's something you should know. But yeah, that's about it. Any questions? Yes, Samina.
I have a question, but it's not directly related to this project. But I was looking into checking Google Docs for broken links. You know, if you have a document and you have different URLs and you want to check whether all the URLs are working or not. So I was looking at, maybe creating a program for that. So in the prerequisite, it said that for Google Cloud, I have to do a Google Cloud console setup, and that I need to create a project in the Google Cloud Console and enable the Google Docs API, obtain the OAuth 2.0 credentials, and it will give me the necessary client ID and API key. So is this the thing that you did right now? Is that what it is?
So just to be clear, you're trying to check for any kind of broken link. So you,
Yeah, in a Google Doc. So in
okay,
the
okay.
Google Doc, Google does not directly give you access. So you have to go through the OAuth, the so so when I was checking ChatGPT, it said that I need to first set up the Google Cloud Console setup and then obtain the API and obtain the credentials. So what you did for this particular thing, is that the same thing?
Not exactly. So Google Cloud actually provides multiple services.
Okay.
This right here would essentially just be the authentication functionality, but I'm pretty sure because all of these functionalities that they have, they are pretty much using very similar libraries. So you
Mhm.
might need to install libraries that you're using in other projects as well. So sometimes, just for the simplicity of it, Google makes it so that when you install one library, it includes a bunch of stuff that you would likely need for a project in a regular basis.
Okay.
But yeah, that's about it, kind of. Google, honestly, Google is very, very intuitive. If you want to use any kind of functionality or any kind of resource that Google provides, it will be very easy to understand and learn as well. For example, right now we are using MongoDB, but Google also provides cloud service, a real-time database as well, like the one that we see over here. So the difference between Google's real-time database and cloud service is that cloud will essentially just save this, and if you refresh, you get the whole thing. But in real-time databases, you see the changes real time. So if you have your window open on one tab and the application running on the other, you can see live changes on the dashboard without even having to refresh. But that's pretty much the only difference, I think. But yeah, Google also has its own cloud services. You could definitely look into that as well. It's called Google Firebase. Firebase actually provides multiple options as well. It provides push notifications and all that. So, I mean, it's pretty interesting. You guys can definitely check it out. Yeah, so that's about it for today. Any questions? So what we've learned today, a small recap would be we first set up the admin roles. What we did for that is we first made sure that we had a drop down already created. And once the drop down was created, we essentially changed the model in our backend where we are adding the role to our user schema. And we also made some changes in the routes over here. We are essentially just passing on whatever we added in the schema. Once all that's done, we create a check that will do a conditional rendering on the button, delete button, because that's the one that we wanted to hide. You could hide more as well if you want. And moving forward, we went on to create the Google login service. For that, we use this library, the React OAuth / Google, and we created a function that essentially on success will get the token. And let me change this back actually. That will get the token, and later we will use that token to get the information and display it on our front end. I have a question in the chat, I think. Do we need to send requests to check if the user continues to log? No, I think Google takes care of that. So what happens is if you're already logged in, like this one doesn't show because we have a custom button over here. Where is it? So we have a custom button over here, but if you take a look at the doc, if you use this right here, the button that Google provided for us, when you try to log in again, Google shows on that button that this user is logged in. So unless you log out before your session times out from Google, you'll stay logged in over there. You don't have to do constant requests to check if the user is logged in or not. Even if you somehow just close the tab, your Google account will still stay logged in unless you do log out. So Google takes care of that. Yeah, that's about it. So that was also like a small recap on what we've done. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I can explain it again. If you don't, let me know as well. OAuth is something that you would probably need in a lot of different places. So there's the user and admin role, because most businesses, they would probably require this functionality. And I think on Friday, right? Yeah, I think on Friday you'll see another version of this phone book app where each user has their own phone book, I think. But yeah, we will probably talk about that later on in the week as well. But yeah, this is a very important functionality. Maybe it may be small, but this actually is something that you'll need a lot. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
So just to clarify, the difference between this one and the one on Friday, we just have one login? Is that what it is?
No, so I think on Friday, the advanced one that we're planning is each user will have separate phone books. For example, over here you see, okay, when I log in, you see these basic phone books for any user, right? So every time a user logs in, they'll have their own personal phone book. So they can add whichever number they like, and that will just stay under their name. And another user logging in will have a separate phone book. It's kind of like the phone book on your phone, similar to that, you could say.
So this
Every
one,
user.
whichever user I log in, I'll get these same favorites and same contacts.
Yes, you're correct.
Oh, okay.
This is more like a phone book in general, like a public access phone book, where a bunch of numbers are going to be there. You can just log in and find out which number you want. Like the old thick phone books that used to be made before with all the emergency numbers. Similar to that. But yeah, that's about it. If you guys don't have any more questions, then I guess we can finish off the lecture over here and we can go on our 10-minute break. After we come back, we will open up breakout rooms, and if you have questions, we can help you out there. All right, so yeah, see you guys in 10 minutes.